After travelling through the Green Mountains of Vermont yesterday afternoon, we arrived at the ski town of Stowe an hour before sunset. We quickly dropped our bags off at our motel and headed along to the Glen Falls to capture the last of the day's sun. After a short 10-minute walk through the forest, you come across a ravine with a waterfall. The trees surrounding the waterfall were well on their way to peak autumn colour, and the leaves were beautifully starting to scatter on top of the rocks along the river. I captured these shots with the Pentax 6.7 and Kodak Portra 400. And as the light was beginning to fade, we headed back into town to prepare for tomorrow's early morning trip to the Flume Gorge Falls area of Stowe. The air this morning was crisp, and once the mist had cleared from across the mountaintops, the sun started to peek through and light up the surrounding forest. We were the only people on the Flume Gorge Falls trail this morning, and all that we could hear was the sound of the birds in the trees and the river passing through the forest. The pathways had splashes of red and orange from where the leaves had been falling, and lines of green mossy rocks leading you down into the gorge and the waterfall. I used the Leica M6 with Kodak Portra 400 to document the trail, and I also shot wide open on my Voigtlander 35mm lens at 1.7 in order to capture the shots in the forest, as it still was quite dark underneath the covering of the trees. Sometimes it's nice whilst you're hiking to just leave the tripod in the bag and quickly photograph what's in front of you whilst taking in and appreciating your new surroundings. Once I had reached the end of the trail, I did actually take some time out and unloaded the tripod and took this long exposure using a Pentax 6.7. I love how the orange and red leaves are rested on top of the wet rocks whilst the water runs through the gorge. And once we finished, we hiked back to the car and spent the afternoon driving east towards New Hampshire, whilst also stopping off at a couple of interesting towns along the way. It was the last day of our week-long autumn photography trip across New England, and we had woken up at 6 AM in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. We set off from our motel and headed along the famous Kankamagus Highway to the Flume Gorge, which is located inside the Franconia State Park. The area itself is a 2-mile looped hike with forests, waterfalls, covered bridges, mountain views, and of course the gorge itself. The yellow leaves were falling all around us as the wind passed on through the forest, and the streams and waterfalls would provide a relaxing soundscape as we walked on throughout the park. The Flume is a natural gorge and is made up of walls of Conway granite that rise to a height of up to 100 feet. It was discovered in 1808 by 93-year-old Jess Guernsey, who came across it whilst out fishing. Photographing the gorge is quite challenging once you get towards the narrow sections, as you have extreme shadowed areas in the rocks contrasting with extreme highlights in the white water and sky. However, once the gorge opens up, the sunlight overhead subtly lights up the granite walls and the surrounding foliage. I really like how Kodak Portra 400 desaturates whilst also warmly glowing up the greens throughout these scenes. So that was actually my last photograph that I took on this trip, and it was now time to pack up the cameras and drive back to Boston to catch our flight back to London. New England during autumn had been absolutely stunning. My favourite parts were the small towns in between our stopovers and also the misty mornings photographing the countryside. I'd got through 10 rolls of 120 film and also 3 rolls of 35mm. And before I wrap up this mini-series, I'm just going to show you some of my favourite shots from the trip. And of course, if you've enjoyed these videos, please like and subscribe, and also follow me over at Instagram. But that's it for today. I'll leave you with my favourite images, and I'll see you in my next video.